What's up, Seth? Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Finally made it to Easter. And we're here now, this episode coming out right after Easter Sunday, looking ahead towards the Easter season. Is there any Easter tradition that sticks out in your mind? Anything, I mean, I guess technically as we're recording this, anything you're still looking forward to, but any like Easter traditions in your family that you're excited to celebrate here soon?
Well, my family, I always got an Easter basket. Even now, we go to my parents' house, Patty and I, and we each have one, and my mom hides them different places in their house, and you have to find it. At 33 years old, I go and I find my Easter basket, and I love it. It's awesome.
This is a big Easter for you in your Jesus year too, so
yeah.
Hope it turns out okay for you. Anything you're expecting in your Easter basket this year?
It's usually just like candy.
Oh, incredible.
Like a lot of chocolate.
I didn't know if there was going to be like an iPod or something in there.
No, it's usually just
awesome.
candy.
We did Easter baskets too. Not anymore, unfortunately. My mom had this Jell-O mold. They're called Jell-O beans. So they're just like the tiniest servings of Jell-O. And then she would do a bunch of different colors and mix them up and serve like a bowl of Jell-O beans as like the Jell-O to go with Easter dinner. And so
that sounds like so
for
much
a while
work.
now. I mean, it's really like you have to do a bunch of different batches, but when you make it, you're like pouring it over like a tray, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah. I think of it as like filling an ice cube tray, but with Jell-O.
Jell-O, okay.
And smaller. But that's like the same function. The thing about it is a while ago, we were like, oh, it'd be fun to have one of those too. And they don't make these molds anymore. And we just kind of gave up on it, being like, I guess this is just going to be like a family thing. And then we very recently thought, like, this would be like the easiest thing in the world to send to a 3D printer. Like, there's a way.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
To make it work. But anyways, Easter traditions aside, Seth, one of my favorite traditions of this podcast is, if not my favorite tradition, is asking, what would you do in this particular situation? Seth, would you want to have a, I guess, nondescript scar in a very visible location, or a very obviously shaped scar in a less visible location? So this is like, when you're looking at the clouds and everyone's like, I see a rabbit. And the other person's like, I see a priest. And it's just like, it's up to interpretation. This like more obviously shaped scar is like, there's no question about what this scar looks like. But it's in a less visible location.
This is good, because I was thinking a less visible location, but I was like, if I don't get to pick what the shape of the scar is, maybe I don't want that. I think I'm going sort of the amorphous scar, but in a more visible location. I just think if I don't get to pick both, like what it is and that it's covered, then I think I don't know. I'm risk averse, so I'd rather just be like, oh, I got this scar riding my bike when I was 4.
Sure, yeah.
Like,
I mean, as someone who has nondescript scars in very visible locations on my face, like, I think I've got to choose that. Otherwise, I feel like I'm, like communicating something about myself that is not true. Yeah, I do think it's funny because I thought of this in like the series in which a boy becomes a wizard. And
wait, that's what I was.
That one is an obvious shape in a very visible location. I just try to throw it off a little bit. If you did have to pick the shape of your less visible scar, let's say you can't pick where it is, but you can pick what it is. What would it be?
Can't pick where, but what? Like a dog.
A dog. Sure.
I don't know. like I was thinking of like some animal, like an eagle or something.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia Eagles logo.
Wow. Well, that's a commitment. I'm trying to think of something really specific that it's like a meme or something
Oh,
like
yeah.
that would be really recognizable. I'm like, I just want a tattoo, apparently.
Yeah.
Um,
Homer going back into the bush. Like, it's your scar.
yeah.
He's like,
Well, Seth, you might be able to guess why we're talking scars in the first part of our episode this week. But as is tradition, the second Sunday of Easter, we have a story about Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, showing his wounds, his scars, to his disciples. And Thomas not being there during the original, he was out picking up the bagels and cream cheese and whatever. He wasn't there for the original revelation, didn't believe the other disciples when they told him. Because honestly, why would you? Let's be real.
yeah.
But then he has the opportunity to see and put his hands in the wounds, and that's what makes him believe. And so this passage comes up every year. We joke about it. How, again, one of my main takeaways from this story continues to be Thomas gets a bad rap. I think his reaction is very reasonable, but he's the one labeled throughout all time as the one who doubts. But I really want to kind of focus in on this idea of wounds and scars, Seth, for us today, because it's almost as though Jesus' scars communicated something. His wounds communicated something to the disciples in these moments of kind of resurrection, mystery, all of this stuff. And so we've talked a little bit about this before, I think, but I'm just curious, Seth, any visible scars you want to share, like literal visible scars that you have that you want to share about? I've mentioned the scars on my face that I've had for, 24 years now, I think, from one sledding accident where I sledded too fast and my hat was too tight and I couldn't hear my sister to bail out, telling me to bail out, and I went headfirst into a thorn bush. I've got others too, but those are certainly my most prominent, most visible. So, anything that comes to mind for you that you want to share?
I have one on my finger. It's not really that visible, but of course it happened. I like skinned my finger like riding a bike or something, but it's like where my finger bends, so it like never really healed. It didn't heal nicely. And then the other one is I have one on my knee that's like pretty. It's like three pretty clear horizontal lines, and that was from when I was riding my scooter. And I like the scooter like slid out, and I fell off, and I just like skinned my knee on all this like gravel. So it was just like, yeah, it was horrible. It felt terrible, and that's why it's been prolonged. Why it never healed right. So, but those are I really think my only two. Well, otherwise, I don't really think I have any. I've been like pretty lucky that I've gotten hurt a lot, but they have it has often not resulted.
It's all internal
in like a
trauma.
lasting scar. Yeah.
Yeah, the other three that come to mind for me, they'll go through quickly. I've got one on my foot from where I dropped a bread knife and it just like stuck into my foot. I have a chunk taken out of one of my shins from sliding into home plate during a baseball game and the catcher cleating my leg. And then I've got like basically like a rug burn scar on one of my arms. It's one of the least prominent, but from a sketch or a skit at a church camp or retreat or something like that. So
that was commitment. You were committed.
Really wide variety of circumstances here that contributed to these lasting marks on my body. Well, sharing scars and talking about scars is one thing, Seth, but I remember being in conversation with a family friend of mine who does work with folks in recovery, and he always talked about the differences between scars and wounds and, things that are active and open versus things that are memories or stories that we remember. And I think about, this story where Jesus kind of confirms who he is by sharing his wounds, sharing his scars. It's just this really interesting idea. But it's also one that I think we talk about a lot in kind of the trajectory to this field, this career path that we've both been on in different ways over the last several years around this notion of vulnerability. um, literally meaning being open to hurt or harm. And there's a lot of, that we could talk about. You could talk about like really seminal works like Henry Nouwen's Wounded Healer, and just the relationship. You can talk about, I think, more modernly, like the work of Brene Brown and her intersection of work of like vulnerability and shame and how that intersects with leadership in particular. But I'm just curious, Seth, to hear your reaction about whether it's about being a pastor, being a leader, even just being a member of a community. What do you think about this idea of vulnerability? About like either showing our wounds or our scars, making them known and visible, or kind of in that way opening yourself up to maybe being hurt further. Again, that's what vulnerability literally means.
I'm going to say something, but just hear me out because it's gonna sound crazy.
Okay.
This is like the one thing that I sort of admire about Donald Trump.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, bear with me. Because people will say something about how he's terrible, and he's just like, "Yep, I am. Like, I'm bad at that," or whatever, Because sometimes he deflects, and he's like, "No, that's not true," and sometimes he's just like, "Yep, that's me," and I'm like, man. Sometimes he has this ability to just own it. Again, not all the time. But that's like one of the few things that I admire about him. And I do think when you own it, it's not that it doesn't have any power, but it changes the way that it has power. Because now it's like you have some control over it. So like I've always tried to just be like, okay, these are sort of like I don't know, I try to be honest about like these are my flaws. Like these are my weaknesses. And I always tell everyone, maybe I've said this on the podcast, that like our strengths and our weaknesses are usually just the opposite of one another. And like the same is true with like our vulnerabilities. What we see in ourselves that we're so good at, that we like can take pride in, it's just the opposite that's our vulnerability.
Yeah. Or like that strength taken to the nth degree,
or
showing up in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's to say, like, not to bring up the president again, but we got that out of the way. But like for me, it's just like to be open about it. Again, changes the way that it has power. So it's like, okay, now we all know.
Yeah.
Now we can work through this together. Like, and if it means I get hurt, I don't know. At least I like consciously knew that was an option, if that makes sense. As opposed to like pushing my vulnerabilities down and pretending like I don't have any. And like I've never been wounded before. And then you get hurt and it's like way worse. As opposed to just like, yeah, this is what my vulnerability is. And like, maybe, I hate to say this, maybe you sort of like expect it at least a little. And that helps it not to hurt as much.
Yeah. I really like what you said there
about Donald Trump.
But yeah, absolutely. Like finally he's getting on board. No. Actually, I actually don't know that I like agree with that assessment of him, to be honest. But I don't want to spend time talking about that. I mean,
sometimes he is just like, no, I'm the best. But every once in a while,
I think you're giving him a little too much credit. That's all I'll say.
That's probably true.
But you're a generous guy. That's fine.
I was trying to give him literally one thing.
Sure. Yeah. But the one thing that I appreciate about what you said is this idea that vulnerability sheds light on the reality of the circumstances. And I do think there's a distinction to be drawn when like you and I approaching each other as friends, like what being open and honest with each other means, like when we are, when we're hurting or when we're going through something, like that's part of what it means to show up for each other. But when you're in a situation where there's another power dynamic at play, like if you were my pastor and you were also like dumping on me about things that were going on that were hard for you, it plays on that dynamic in a way that can lead to a lot of harm. It's just like when children feel responsible for caring for their parents when they're too young
Yeah.
to begin doing so. You know, it's like it can lead to all sorts of different things. But the piece of this that I want to reiterate with you, though, is like, if you're not open and like sharing these parts of yourselves, even if you're not like talking about things that are really tender or open wounds, and are talking about things that have hurt you or ways that you've, maybe even ways that you failed in the past, you're both setting up like an unrealistic image of yourself, whether that's one that you're reinforcing in your own mind or communicating to others, but you're also limiting the new connections that you can make with other people too. I mean, I've even been in situations where like I look back and I'm like, I don't love how this went down, but like the process of being vulnerable and open with others like helped foster some real connections. And so like I'm thinking back to experiences I had in high school with our youth group on like mission trips or attending camp, and our first night activity was also everyone tell your most embarrassing story. And there was like, I think my challenge with it was like there was no option not to participate.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but what that did was it like lowered the stakes around sharing about other things that were coming up for folks later in the week, more or less.
Yeah.
And what I did appreciate about it too is like everyone was it wasn't just like, hey, all you kids share something embarrassing. Like the leaders and volunteers that were there with us too are also participating. And so even though, again, how we got there, not how I appreciate getting into that kind of experience, but like the result of it was what felt like a very open and safe like place to be more open about what you're experiencing in other ways too. So it's like it feels essential, but it also feels, and this is an important theme in like Brene Brown's work too. It's like vulnerability without boundaries is nothing but like inappropriate oversharing too. It's like it's not just saying you're an open book about all things in all places. It's really focused in on how like much or how little you're actually like putting up appropriate boundaries around that vulnerability too. So in light of this, Seth, I guess I'm just curious about your reactions to the role of Jesus's wounds and scars in the story, and what you think they can tell us about the relationship we can have with our wounds and scars as we interact with others. And I'm intentionally leaving that pretty open to see what kind of direction with that you want to go.
And one of the things that strikes me is that Jesus, like, he shows them, right? Like, especially the scar that's on his side, going back to our what would you do in this particular situation question. Like, that's something that you wouldn't readily see.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like hidden. And like he's willing to, to lift up his shirt, to move the tunic out of the way, I don't know, and to show Thomas like that scar too. Not just the ones that are on his hands that are more visible, but the one that's on his side. And I guess like it's a reminder for me that like sometimes we have scars that are more visible, right? Like you talked about, the one that like on your face from the thorn that's more visible, but we also have some like on your ankle that are less visible, right? And maybe it's not just, we don't just stop at letting people see the ones that are visible, but we kind of but we can take the next step. We can show them the ones that are a little bit more personal. And that in doing so, like it helps them see us in a new way, to be much closer to us, to see us as human, maybe, right? To see us as people who are like them, who are not perfect. I think showing our vulnerabilities, our wounds that are sometimes a little more hidden can help people to, like in the story, to trust us. That we're not like putting on a facade. Like this is really us. We're not just like it's clear we're not just papering over our mistakes. but that our mistakes are there too.
You want to know what this made me think of?
Donald
The
Trump.
movie. No, the movie Elf.
So I knew it wasn't Donald Trump.
But you know when Buddy's working at the department store and Santa comes in, he's like, "You're not Santa." He starts asking all the questions, and he's like,
Yeah.
"What song did I sing for you on your birthday this year?" And like, "Happy birthday!" Of course. It's like asking bad questions. But it's like this experience to validate, like, there's something suspicious about you. It'd be like, Seth, if you showed up, you're like, "Oh, I don't have my glasses, and I don't need them." There's like this distinctive feature that's like, I know to be so true of who you are and your experience of the world that if a version of you showed up and that was no longer true, I'd be like, who is this guy? And so I'm like, it almost strikes me as like, based on what the disciples experienced, they needed to see scars. They needed to see wounds because of what they just witnessed. And like you just said at the end of what you're saying there, that those wounds confirmed who he was, right? And
yeah.
And if we're in these kinds of deep committed relationships with each other and communities that we're part of, like, people are going to recognize us by the ways that we've been hurt and by the things that we've made our way through, often with their support too. And so it's just like, I don't know, it feels like there's value to that. But Jesus also wasn't, on the main stage of whatever Roman stuff was going on at the time, being like, "Look, I'm back," with, like doing like magic tricks, putting his fingers through his hands or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like he reserved that act of openness and vulnerability for those that he was already closest with too. And so it just further solidifies, it's like this, the importance of vulnerability is not about like unquestioning openness with everybody in every situation, but in the situations where being known is important and being known is safe, then those are the spaces where it can happen.
I think that's a really important point at the end. Yeah, that he waits, like, to be with the people who he's close to start revealing, especially the deepest wounds, the biggest ones, the ones that, like, I mean, could really shape, how people think of him, right? Like, you can see the hands, you can see that wound, but you don't get to see that deepest wound, till he's with his disciples, his friends. I like that point a lot.
Seth, can I pray for us?
Absolutely. Please do.
God, with wounded hands, you show us where you have been wounded, to speak peace into our fear. Grant us courage to face what is broken within and among us, to trust that you will meet us even when we are wounded. Make us bearers of peace and signs of new life in the world. Mindful of the many names by which your children cry out to you from all over the world, I pray in the name of the risen one, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.